Hi, this is James Cook of UMA, and this is a message for students in our Cultivating Community course. We have a snow day today, although most of the day it's been a rain day. It's been a messy driving day, and so we're safe not going in to school, but that means we haven't been able to meet. And because we haven't been able to meet, we have not really been able to engage as a group. And so we're going to do something a little different this week. You still have to do the work that we would have put in and the time we would have put in if we hadn't met in person and had that wonderful group circle experience. But Professor Corlew and I would like you to shift your work now a little bit, considering that this week you are by yourself, you are alone. We'd like you to use this time, special time, to refer to the academic work that really underpins the practical work we're doing in cultivating plants, in cultivating our group, in cultivating the garden, in cultivating community. So, what do I mean by this? I mean, over the last 3 weeks, we have had a series of readings. And these readings, hopefully, you're reflecting on in your journals, but also now, for this week, I would like you to go to the discussion boards, find the discussion board that is specific to our, this week, the snow day discussion board. And I'd like you to think about Bronfenbrenner. I'd like you to think about the piece that takes Sen's capabilities and choices work and applies it. And I'd like you to think about the introduction and chapter 2 to How Organizations Develop Activists by Hahrie Han of Harvard University. So I'd like to start the conversation by sharing my own thoughts, and I'm sure Professor Corlew would like to jump in as well. But here's how I've been thinking about these readings and what they have to say. The first in my mind is Bronfenbrenner. Bronfenbrenner is thinking very generally about this notion of human development. How is it that a human being becomes more than they were? And in what direction do they become more? Or to what extent do they not become more? So a classic American individualist answer would say, well, that is up to the individual. If to the extent that we have a great individual, human being, it's because that individual must have great qualities. Either perhaps they have great genetics, or they have great moral character, or perhaps it's that they did something right when they were young, they ate their Wheaties, and that helped them as individuals grow. And I think if you cornered Urie Bronfenbrenner in an elevator and you said, are individual characteristics irrelevant? The answer would be no. Of course they're not irrelevant, but they're surrounded by a large context that determines what an individual is going to become. And if we can think about that context, it starts from the micro level to the macro level, where micro means small, macro means big. Just about any kind of academic enterprise, any kind of work we do where we try to understand a phenomenon has micro aspects and macro aspects. There's microbiology, macrobiology. There's microecology, macroecology. There's microphysics, right? Particle physics. There's macrophysics, cosmology. Similarly, you can think of the same kind of things going on in social science. And in social science, the micro is, the most micro would be the individual or the units within the individual. Neuropsychology. What are the elements of the brain? How do they work? What are the elements of the emotional system? How do those elements work together? But Bronfenbrenner is interested in things outside the individual. So that first micro level has to do with relations with others. And then there are ways that we are embedded in, I would say as a sociologist, in the organizations that are around us. And do they sustain us? Or do they develop us? Do they socialize us? Do they acculturate us? Do they lead us to become more capable? Do they build capabilities? Or do they not? And what kind of capabilities do they build? We can think about those organizations furthermore as embedded in institutions. What's the difference between an organization and an institution? Organization is particularly something like University of Maine at Augusta, but that's part of a broader system, and it's part of a role for an organization to play in doing something for individuals, but not just for individuals, but also for other organizations and for the society as a whole. A functionalist would say we call that an institution, and it would be the institution of higher education, so that the University of Maine at Augusta is occupying a similar position as perhaps University of Southern Maine or Washington State University, Wayne State University, Cleveland State University, public higher education institutions. As an institution, public higher education is trying to do something. What is it trying to do? Well, it's trying to build capabilities. Churches are particular organizations within institutions of religion. How do religions build capability? You can begin to think about how individuals then, who we think of as perhaps just perfectly endowed or having done great things to lift themselves up by the individual bootstraps, really are surrounded by networks of relationships, by being members in organizations, and also by being embedded in a set of institutions that have been created in a society in order to do things that take human ability and develop it to pursue certain ends. That's where I see Bronfenbrenner coming in. Now, Professor Corlew may have a different way and a direction to take that, and that's fine, that's actually cool. But I would like you to reflect on that. What are, in our garden, and in our gardening effort, I'd like you to think about in the discussion boards, what are the ecological contexts in which we're operating here and now to develop this garden? What do we need to attend to that's outside ourselves as individuals in order to make that garden work? Related. How organizations develop activists. Now, Hahrie Han does this great thing in the introduction of talking about three kinds of activists or participants in a social movement, which is really what we're doing. So this is on pages 10, 11, 12. She compares and contrasts lone wolves, mobilizers, and organizers. So lone wolves are individuals who care a lot about something. They work by themselves, and they do things that are highly specific, that require a great amount of ability, and they carry out what they do with a great amount of skill. And this is important. It is not to be denigrated. So this may be someone who collects on their own data regarding the watershed health of a particular river basin and tracks over time, collecting data, information on the amount of arsenic in the system or the amount of lead flowing through the system, which, think about the community of Flint, Michigan, really matters. So they can contribute on their own to that information awareness. They may testify then in front of a committee, in front of a legislature or to a regulatory board, and they can change the world that way. But they're working on their own. Then there's a mobilizer. So mobilizers, right, are those individuals who try to bring people in to social movement organization, not just an activist effort that might be full of individuals working all on their own, but a social movement organization. And the idea that mobilizers have is to say, well, we as an organization have certain needs, and then there's certain people out there. We're going to take people where they are, and we're going to figure out what they can do, what they're willing to do, and we'll plug them into those areas. Okay, so you're a letter writer. You're good at writing letters? Okay, great. We need you for a letter writing campaign. Oh, you like to knock on doors? Great. We need you here. Oh, you just really like stuffing envelopes? You're kind of an introvert? That's great. No worries. We have a room over here. You can stuff envelopes to your heart's content. And that's what the mobilizers do. They take people where they are, and they help them to be active and do something to further a social movement. That matters as well. However, they don't help people become more than they are. They don't help them to grow. Organizers are the folks in a social movement who look at people not as they are, but as they could be, and say, okay, it's great that you want to help. It's great that you want to participate. What would you like to learn? What would you like to be able to do? And how can I help you get to that point where you become the kind of person who can transform our movement? That takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of patience on the part of the person who's learning and on the part of the person who either might be teaching, if they take on that direct role, or guiding someone who wants to increase their abilities and their skills, and helping that person to develop themselves. Not necessarily to be taught, but maybe to teach themselves, to develop themselves. It's a long-term process. It's high commitment. That's what an organizer does. And that relates, really, if you think about it, to what's in chapter 2 on page 34, to this notion of this four-tier development between people who at the bottom simply affiliate, yeah, I signed up for a list. Second, they come and they participate in something, they go do something, they stuff an envelope, they knock on a door, they show up to hold a sign on a picket line. Then those are committed to outcomes, who are mobilizers, are the folks here, right? So they're going to do something. And at the top are, and this is in Hahrie Han's model, the organizers, those who commit to developing future leaders, right? So you can see that there are more people at the bottom, fewer people at the top, because it's an increasing level of commitment. So there's a lot of writing in here, right? So I'm trying to condense this down and describe what I find. What I find is interesting in chapter 2 is then, given this notion about the distinction between lone wolves and mobilizers and organizers, the comparison between low and high engagement sites. What do we find? Okay, table 2.5, table 2.6. This is, I think, the real counterintuitive meat. What's over here? All these independent variables, to use social science lingo. All these things that might influence whether you have a low engagement site or a high engagement site. And what does Hahrie Han find? Well, they don't matter. Things like whether a site is low engagement or high engagement. It doesn't matter whether it's filled with women or men. White people or non-white people, married people or non-married people, people with high education or low education, older people, younger people, conservative people or liberal people. It doesn't show any difference. So what does that mean? Are we supposed to go home and go, oh dear, well, don't have anything to guide us? No, she's setting up for future chapters, okay? Future week's reading. If these things don't matter, something else will. What? I think the title is a clue. I think she's going to have something to say about not just mobilization, but something about the idea of development. Of organizing as a practice that leads to greater engagement or lesser engagement. So, what do I want you to do in the discussion board? I would like you to consider, for our project here at UMA, the community garden, and in our class, the act of building this community garden, I want you to think about yourself, talk about yourself. Are you a lone wolf? Are you a mobilizer? Are you an organizer in your current practices? And then here's the second question for you. Which would you rather be? Where would you like to see yourself in 5 years, talking to your 5-year younger self? Hey, I became a good lone wolf, really highly expert in something, able to contribute that. Would you like to say, hey, I'm someone who recruits people and brings them in where they are? Would you like to say that you're a developer? Tell me about that. Tell me where you find yourself. And think about, as a kind of a secondary question, what does a group need in order to succeed? What does our group need to be doing? Does it need to be lone wolfing it? Does it need to be mobilizing? Does it need to be organizing? And what would that look like? Because we're going to have to do something in order to accomplish this garden. So the last piece is a reading by 3 individuals who are taking a look at Sen's capabilities standpoint as it applies to New Zealand and Samoa regarding development of a kind of a community of lending and micro-development and a community garden. And Sen's approach thinks about capabilities and choices. And it says, really, this should sound familiar now, a successful effort in activism is one that is not simply going to bring benefit to participants, but is going to increase participants' capabilities and choices in the direction that they would like to have them be developed. So, I posed a question in announcements, and I'd like to repeat it here, and I'd like you to discuss it in the discussion board. Okay, there's a lot for you to discuss, but that's okay, go with it. Think about capabilities and choices, building capabilities and choices. Think about how it relates to Hahrie Han, Chapter 2, mobilizing versus organizing. Now, think about, in our community garden, who are the participants going to be? What are the capabilities and choices in that gardening effort that are going to be developed? What will they look like? Try to identify them. Apply the reading on Sen's capabilities and choices approach and see what you can come up with. The answers, working from academic kind of readings, should really inform what we do as a group. Okay, last thought, and then I'll let you go. We were going to be making a decision about our Constitution. And Professor Corlew and I decided, rather than try to brute force that in a discussion environment where we can't look at each other in the eye, we're going to put that off till next week. We'd like that to be a face-to-face kind of review and decision. So we look forward to seeing that happen next Wednesday, when we hope there will be no blizzard in order to stop us, or slush on the road. See you next week, and until then, stay warm, stay dry, and think about growth.